All right, let's go ahead and get started. First of all, just want to quickly introduce myself. My name is Chet. I'm the head of content strategy here at Forethought. Looking forward to this discussion. I'm going to be having Rajiv Patel and Terry Monroe on this call today. Rajiv Patel is our director of product marketing. He heads up all of our positioning and works with our customers to make sure that we are approaching the market and talking to our customers in the way that we should be. Prior to working at Forethought, Rajiv was at Salesforce working on the Einstein team, especially in the customer service experience industry. Thank you for coming, Rajiv.
Happy to be here.
Terry, you are the head of customer experience at ArenaCX, one of our valued partners. Prior to working at ArenaCX, Terry was running customer support teams for Republic Wireless. Welcome to the discussion, Terry.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Now, before we jump into the discussion, I wanted to tee up kind of what started this whole meeting. So we were working with ArenaCX, and they had recently put together a study on the customer support industry. I wanted to share some of the stats from that study. So when we take a look at this document, after doing this study, hundreds of different consumers, they found that 56% of consumers said that they would pay more for a product if it guaranteed excellent customer service. In addition to that, they found that 69% of customers have abandoned a brand because of a negative customer service experience. This is one of my favorite ones. More than 50% of millennials and Gen Z would rather go to the dentist than help with a customer service issue. I would probably fit into that category myself. I hate the dentist, but at the same time, I also don't love poor customer service experiences. And then 81% of people experienced a higher than normal wait times during the pandemic. And I think this next stat is really telling that even though 81% experienced that, more than half of people, or almost half of people, felt like that wasn't necessarily true, that it was a lie. So they weren't necessarily trusting the customer service industry, even though we were telling them that we were super busy. So knowing all that, that's what's guiding this discussion today. Is we're going to take a look at how can we improve the overall customer experience. We're going to look at how do we increase customer support agent productivity and performance. We're going to take a look at the tactics we can deploy to improve customer satisfaction, and then how can we do all of this without increasing our net costs. At the end, I want to make sure everyone knows we're going to take everything we've talked about today, throw it into an action plan checklist, and then we're also going to put together a calculator that you can use to take to your teams and show the ROI of potential investments you're going to make and changes you might make in your customer support operations. Okay. So when we look at these different topics, let's first talk about improving the agent productivity and agent performance. Now, a key part of agent performance is making sure that our agents stay with our organizations for a long period of time. When I take a look at customer service agents, those that have been with us for a long period of time, they have what I like to call tribal knowledge. They know our product, they know our customer, they know what help documentation we have, they know the ins and outs of our organization and the struggles that we have. And so retaining agents is a big part of improving agent performance and productivity. Terry, you've working in this field for a long time. You've managed teams. What are some of the reasons why you see that agent attrition is higher in customer service and maybe other industries?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I think it's a question a lot of companies are asking themselves, especially these days. Typically in this space, I believe it's average agent attrition is something like 30 to 45% a year. And that's like 2 to 3 times higher than the average across all the industry. So it's definitely an issue. And I think one of the things that you see is that, as a job, customer service is a stressful and anxiety-inducing job. It's a lot of monotony, a lot of multitasking. It's really beyond what I could do myself. I know that. A lot of low-value tasks, and it can be a thankless job. So I think that's just on the face of it, that's a big part of a driver. And then when you add in the impacts of the pandemic and some of the labor shortages in the lower skilled areas, it's really you're competing with rising wages and other really competitive offers for folks in this space. So it's definitely something that's a growing trend. I think I read somewhere where agent turnover was as high as 80% during the pandemic. So one of the things, to your point, Chet, is that having a great team that stays around can really mask a lot of other issues you may have in your overall support organization, because you keep that tribal knowledge and folks have a level of passion and belief in what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember in the last organization where I was at, I was managing a team of small customer support agents, and like you said, it's a thankless role. Our 2 or 3 agents at the time, like, it's not very often that people are chatting in because they just love you. Usually they have a concern of some sort, and so it's not very often that those customer support agents are always feeling the love from the customers. And so, like you said, it's a thankless role. So, Rajiv, what are some strategies that you're seeing companies are deploying to keep agents satisfied and continuing to feel valued, like they're an asset opposed to just kind of a cog in the machine?
Yeah, definitely. And I definitely agree with what you, Chet, and Terry have shared. It's interesting looking at the attrition rates, and just kind of adding on to that. I mean, agents, they spend a majority of their time performing these mundane, repetitive tasks. That can get tedious. That could lead them not being satisfied with their job, which could then result in a poor customer experience. But yeah, there's definitely a couple recommendations that I have. The first thing that I'd recommend is really empowering your agents with the tools that they need to be able to perform their job well. That could be something like deploying a customer service chatbot that helps automate actions as well as answers. And then it'll free up your agent's time to focus not on those repetitive tasks, but really the more complex issues that require that human touch. Another thing that I'd recommend, and Chet, you kind of mentioned this earlier, but really empowering your agents to make suggestions and changes to the broader strategy. I mean, these are the folks that are engaging with your customers every day, whether it's a positive or negative issue. They really have that knowledge and expertise. And so I definitely recommend leveraging that expertise, leveraging that experience, whether it's maybe, building content for that chatbot, or even managing the chatbot itself. And just the last thing that I add there is, just making sure your agents feel seen and heard, whether it's broadcasting their achievements across the organization, recognizing their hard work, or even just, responding to the changes that they'd like to see.
Yeah, in some ways, your customer support agents are kind of the biggest billboard for your company. They're interacting on a human-to-human level with your customers. So not only do they have a lot of experience, and they're really creating the experience that you want for your customers, but they also have some of the best insight into the real issues your customers have. And so if you're not going to your team, they're definitely not going to feel as involved. They're not going to feel as valued and appreciated with your organization. So totally. Jumping into kind of like agent productivity, Terry, I'd love to see how you would break down as a customer support leader the different types of metrics that you use to measure productivity. How are you using them with your teams? How are you using them to make decisions moving forward?
Sure. Yeah, and I think there's really, going into that space, there's really, I'd say, 2 things that are really important about deciding what metrics you use as important and you want to hold your agents accountable to. And I think the first thing is really important that I think is often a missed target is making sure that agent can control the metric. So that way, if you're giving feedback that, hey, XYZ number is not high enough, it's something that the agent can say, oh, you're right, I can do better, and I can control that number, versus, well, this is really a function of what's happening around me. So I think that's the first consideration there. Secondly, it's really important to make sure that metric is going to actually create a behavior that is in the customer's best interests. Sometimes I've seen a lot of productivity metrics which are touch oriented, which I don't mind in certain cases of how many touches our agents making, but oftentimes that can incentivize behavior that makes it harder for the customer to get a solution, because instead of taking the time to read the entire question or the issue and solving it in one touch, there's a lot of back and forth and one touch interactions which provide very little value, but they may look really good on a KPI dashboard. So I think those are 2 of the things you want to consider. And with that, I like to think of first touch resolution obviously is a big driver. It's really an efficiency based metric, but I think if you layer that in with productivity, it makes a lot of sense. The way I like to think about productivity isn't again, how much work we're doing. It's how many customers are we solving solutions for, providing solutions for, and servicing, and getting obviously good feedback for that. So that's the way I like to look at that productivity. And one of the things to kind of layer in with that is if you're going to have some level of touch metric, or total emails sent, or total calls taken, average handle time, total utilization, those sorts of metrics, you want to make sure you're measuring as well a customer effort score to understand, are we actually making the life for our customers easier? Is it easier to get help from us, or are we just making sure that we're doing more work per agent than we were doing last month? So I think those are a few things that I like to consider. And beyond that, I'll pass it back to you, Chet.
Yeah, I mean, customer effort score. I love that, because how difficult are we making it on our customers to get a resolution to their problem? Another thing I like that you mentioned is making sure we're focusing on the metrics that our agents can actually make a difference on. Like, it's really frustrating when someone says, hey, can you go make we need to focus on this one KPI or this one metric, and I don't feel empowered that I can make a difference on moving that to one way or the other. And so that's really important as well. Rajiv, how do you see agents or leaders using these metrics to kind of inform their team and make strategic adjustments in their operating plan?
Yeah, so I definitely think there's a few ways that support teams can use these metrics to, of course, inform their teams, but really drive greater impact. The first thing I'd recommend is really using those metrics to understand if their support processes are meeting customer needs. Like, are they effective enough? Are they efficient enough? They can use the metrics to identify key improvements for increasing cost effectiveness, customer retention. They can use it to visualize their team's performance over time, set specific goals for their team. Or, they could even use it to understand capacity utilization, and then use that to prepare their resources accordingly.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. When we take a look at, working with agents, there's an argument to be made for focusing on both on the engagement and quality metrics as opposed to just speed and efficiency. How might that change an agent's perception of being seen as perhaps undervalued and underutilized, instead of just being a driving force for value for the company?
Yeah, I think one thing that I think about here in this space is, if you are thinking about your customer experience, and you can really bifurcate, ideally in any situation, your tickets into kind of two fields. It's one where we want to prioritize speed and efficiency, and then the other group where we know that engagement and quality is really important. And in that first bucket, I think it's something the question you need to ask yourself is, if we're prioritizing speed and efficiency so much that it's at the cost of quality, perhaps, is there a way that this can be automated? Because it not only is it cost money to have agents answering these questions that maybe could be deflected, but it's also going to burn your team out. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. So I think if you're asking that question and you're looking at speed and efficiency as a key indicator for what you're trying to do, I feel like you're asking the wrong question to start with. So I think putting the emphasis back on quality and freeing your team up to provide high quality service is the kind of thing that can really, I think, jumpstart growth for a brand, right? We'll get into that, I think, later, but it's something that is, in my opinion, end all be all. Are you doing good business? Are you providing good service? Are you meeting customer expectations? And just being able to do that from an agent perspective, I think, is going to do wonders for their morale. We talked earlier about attrition being maybe the most important driver to successful customer service organization. I feel like if you're treating your agent with priority and allowing them to work to provide high quality service and be proud of their work, it's going to go a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one thing I wanted to know is, as you're listening to our discussion today, if you have a comment that's related to what we're discussing, please feel free. Nicole made a really good point earlier. We were talking about agent attrition. She mentioned there's not a high enough salary. There's not enough recognition. It's typically considered a low skill job, which is absolutely not the case. This is one of the hardest jobs in the industry. There's typically not seen to be very many pathways to higher positions. Again, that's not necessarily true, but that's the mindset that a lot of our agents see. And so as we continue this discussion, if you have comments you want to share, let us know. We would love to add those to the discussion. So One of the things I want to talk about regarding agent productivity is the onboarding and training process. When I was managing a small team, when we brought on somebody, this really opened my eyes because we had somebody that had been with our company for really since the beginning of the company, and they knew our customer, they knew our industry, they knew the product in and out. And then as we brought somebody else on, we thought that, hey, we can just double our efforts here because we're going to go from 2 to 3. But the reality was it almost made it so that it was harder because, the first 2 agents that really understood our industry and our customers, when we brought in that 3rd agent, the onboarding process, we didn't take the necessary steps to improve it and to really focus on their training and their onboarding. And so the other agents that were seasoned, they were spending half their time helping this new agent with questions. And so it almost made us all the agents less productive, right? And so when you talk about training and onboarding, Rajiv, how do proper training and onboarding improve their productivity?
Yeah, totally. I think that's a great example, Chet, that you shared. I mean, really onboarding, enablement, training, like it's key. I mean, if you think about it, agents are the front line of customer support. And, it's part of their job to respond to questions as quickly as possible and also represent your business in the most positive light. And Chet, I think you kind of touched on that earlier. If you don't properly onboard and enable our agents, really enable them with the knowledge, the tools, information, or even if it takes them hours or days to find the answer that they're looking for, you can imagine that's going to result in a poor customer experience. And, we've seen that with customers, data living in different parts of the organization, agents having to manually search for answers, go across different systems, resulting in longer wait times, cases piling up, and ultimately unhappy customers. And so again, by onboarding and enabling your agents, whether it's maybe educating them on your company's policies and procedures, maybe it's providing a deep understanding of your products and services, really helping them know your customer, it'll help build their confidence when dealing with customers. They'll be more educated, informed, they can address the customer needs faster, and then build customer loyalty. And the other thing I would add to that is, I think that by not properly investing really in your agent's success, it can lead them to not being satisfied, not motivated, which could then turn into them getting bored or even burnt out.
Yeah, I feel like absolutely. I feel like there's this unmentioned principle that we've been alluding to on every one of these questions, that the customer experience is only going to be as good as the agent experience.
Yes.
Do you want to talk to that a
Absolutely.
little bit, Rajiv?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you think about it, the customer experience is dependent on the agent experience, right? And a poor agent experience can impact, how easy it is for an agent to solve a ticket, or even the quality of the agent's interaction with their customers. And, even if a customer just has one bad experience, I mean, it's likely they're going to take their business elsewhere. I know I've felt that before when I'm dealing with, when I've experienced poor customer service. And, I was actually reading this thing. I think PwC put it out. They said something like, unfriendly service through live support is one of the biggest reasons why customers take their business elsewhere. And so, I think the key here is that in order to best serve our customers, we really need to best serve our agents. And, kind of as we've been talking, about because kind of as we're talking about throughout this discussion, it's really about, again, empowering your agents, making sure they're prepared, equipped, armed with the right resources and tools so that they can best serve our customers and really create a great customer experience.
Yeah. There's this interesting comment by Chris I wanted to show here, that they recently take a look at their salaries and they wanted to make sure they're retaining those superstars. I mean, it's really important when we talk about providing an excellent customer experience, like those people that have been with your organization for a long time, they understand the unique needs of each one of your customers. So it's really important that you put forth those efforts to recognize that and to retain them. Okay. So Terry, one last question for you on this topic, and then we can move into to customer satisfaction. I'm curious your thoughts on how leaders can improve the way that they support and enable their agents. Like, what are the different types of ways that they can enable them to succeed?
Yeah, I think, honestly, I thought the comments by Nicole and Chris as well, I think those two, in some ways, really hit the nail on the head. I think the first thing I think of is stop treating your agents like a commodity, right? And because it's not, right? These aren't easy jobs, right? They're not easy. And if you've ever tried to hire, quickly, it's not easy to get good people in quickly who can do these jobs, and stay there. So I think it's becoming a scarce resource as opposed to a commodified resource. As people who can do this really well as the work becomes more and more complex, and we can deflect lower and lower touch issues away with automation and that sort of thing. It gets that much harder because you're really going to be dealing with only escalations and only complicated things that can't be solved by a robot. And I know most robots are smarter than I am, so if things are getting past them, it's a challenging solution for those agents. So, and I think in keeping with that, it's finding ways to recognize and reward them. A formal recognition program, maybe some level of an experiential reward, perhaps, right? Something that where the agent feels like they went above and beyond, and they feel like they got recognized for that, and as an individual. Because we all know as customers how we don't like to be treated like a number, right? I think that it's the same holds true to your agents, and really creating those personal relationships and showing how much they mean to the organization. Because at the end of the day, as was mentioned earlier, your support organization is your front line, it's your backbone. It's what people are going to walk away thinking about your company. And to that end, we'll talk more about those benefits later, I think. But I think that's a big part of it. But beyond that, I think from a process perspective, deflecting low value, highly monotonous tasks is a great way to make them feel recognized. Hey, we recognize you're a smart person who can do more than just answer the same question 20 times a day. So we're going to make sure that you don't have to do that. Giving them more autonomy to make decisions and important decisions about the way they work and the way their teams work. Allowing them to try their hand at maybe cross-selling or upselling and finding ways to drive the business forward. Be able to give ideas about what they should be doing, what the product should be doing next, and providing feedback there. And I think, again, I think Nicole mentioned this, but opportunities for upward mobility. I think that's a one key thing we didn't really touch on about driving attrition. You have a lot of young people in this industry who are looking to move in their careers, and they don't see a path for that. Regardless of how good of a job you're doing recognizing them, if they don't see a path for growth, it's really a tough thing to keep them happy. So I think that's a broad list, but I think there's a lot of things you can do and be explicit about.
Absolutely. You bring that up. I remember a conversation I had with our best support agent, and he came to me and we were talking about his just doing a one-on-one. And he's like, hey, this person in the company who at the time was our leading sales rep came to me and really recommended I get out of support because he told me it's a dead end job. And I was shocked that our team was feeling that way, right? They need to feel that there is upward mobility, that there's a career path, because it really is. This is one of the most important functions of an organization, is taking care of your customers. There are countless stats showing how important retaining your customers is to your growth and overall profitability. It is so much harder to bring in a new customer than it is to retain a customer. And you do that through proper customer support. Rajiv, anything you wanted to add on to that before about enabling agents?
Yeah, totally. And I just wanted to add, I'm seeing the comments coming in, and I love it because it's really, I feel like it's really hitting the nail of like just showing that, the importance of support agents and the value that they provide to companies. And even, Michael's saying right now, support agents are the beating heart of the company. That's absolutely right. But Chet, just to add on to the question, I mentioned this before, but again, empowering your agents with the right tools that they need to perform their job well. And, at Forethought, one of the tools that we empower agents with is our Assist tool, which is all about assisting agents with the right resources, relevant knowledge articles, really the second they open up a case. And I think there was a stat that Mike on our product team shared. Chet, what was it? Around, I think 80% of customers would be disappointed if they couldn't use the Assist tool anymore. Is that right?
Yeah. They surveyed our customers. We have thousands and thousands of agents using this tool, and 80% of them said that they'd be disappointed if they couldn't use it, because agents care about support. They don't like, Terry was talking earlier, like, believe it or not, agents don't want to respond to 150 questions about forgetting their password. Like they want to be enabled to succeed so that they can feel successful, and tools help them to do that so that they can automate the very simple repetitive tasks and focus on what they're good at, is solving complex customer problems. And so agents, they want that sort of enablement. So
yeah,
great. Well, let's talk about customer satisfaction. Customer satisfaction correlates with their experience. And the one metric that teams as universal teams is CSAT. Terry, walk us through CSAT. What is CSAT? How is it calculated?
Yeah, so I think there's a few ways to obviously measure CSAT. The way I like it the most is just the binary, the number of satisfied responses you get divided by the total number of responses you've solicited. It's going to give you a clean percentage. And I think one of the things that it's really important here in terms of why CSAT's important and why I really like it is because you can, if you've got your system set up in such a way, and I really encourage to do so, you can track the actual satisfaction level to an individual level of service, right? And while you may not be able to allocate that or attribute that to an individual agent because it may be a shared ticket or case, being able to say, hey, this customer gave us this feedback and this was their behavior, it really opens up the door to understanding how your support organization is driving the high-level business. How are they coming back for repeat purchases if you're a one-time seller? Are they a subscriber and they're staying longer and their overall churn rate is much lower? Being able to bifurcate that group and say, well, if I've got an 85% CSAT, that means 15% of my people are not satisfied, 85% are, and I can understand the cohort level behavior. And I've done this study several times across several companies, and you can always see very clear differences between churn or revenue or referral rates and growth from those customers that give you satisfied satisfied responses versus the alternative. And so it's a clear as day driver, and I think it's a lagging indicator of how well we did something. Hey, we service this customer, and sometimes it's hard to break out, hey, is this a bad CSAT because the product's bad, or is it a bad CSAT because the experience is bad? And I think it's always important to try to word that CSAT survey in such a way where you're trying to focus in on the customer support aspect of their experience. But being able to make that draw that relationship there is really important to understanding how much you want to invest in your customer support organization, right? And being able to justify investment to drive CSAT up, and overall drive top line revenue and no longer see support as a cost center.
Yeah, absolutely. You're talking about churn and being seen as a cost center. Like, just for a plug for what we're going to give you guys, we're going to talk about this later. Terry has a tool that he uses to kind of forecast the potential ROI that you can have as you start to focus on customer satisfaction, and we'll talk about that later in it. So just want to put a plug. Make sure you stay to the end because we're going to talk about that. He's going to walk us through it, and then we'll make sure everyone gets a copy of that. The other thing you mentioned is, it's CSAT does not necessarily have to mean that I don't like the product. I had a recent experience where there's a marketing automation tool that I absolutely love. I've used it for 6 or 7 years. I'm not going to dive into the brand, but I'll just say that I drink the orange Kool-Aid and I love it. However, over the last couple of weeks, I've had multiple experiences where I've had a problem and I've walked away not getting my problem resolved. I've been quite frustrated about it, actually. Yesterday, I had another question, and I went into that question just assuming that these guys aren't going to fix my problem because they haven't the last 2 or 3 times. So, but that's the importance of CSAT, is getting those sort of reports, because CSAT can be seen as both a lagging and a leading indicator, right? And so if you don't have the right practices and policies in place, CSAT can help show that there are some things that are broken, right? But it can also predict future churn. Now, I'm not at that point yet. I still love the product, but if this were to continue down the road, there might be a point in time where I'm like, I've just had enough. I'm not getting the level of support. I love the way the product works, but I'm going to explore new solutions, right? And that's a way that teams can utilize these sort of metrics. Rajiv, I'd love to hear your take on some of the different factors. And this, both of you guys can answer this. What are the different factors that help determine CSAT scores?
Yeah, so I think some of the key factors are like resolution. Was the ticket resolved? Speed, like how long did it take for the agent to resolve the case or the ticket? But 2 other things I would add there. The first one being, just really knowing your customers, whether it's knowing their name, their purchase, issue history, just really having all that context so you can really provide the personalized experience that customers really expect. And then just the other thing that I would add to that is really just making easy for your customers to contact you. right? So thinking about your omni-channel strategy, really for years, voice and email were the primary channels for customers to engage with support. But that's changed, and we've really seen this upward trend in seeking support through other channels, whether it's SMS and social media. So really just meeting your customers where they're at and making it an easy experience for them to be able to contact and engage with you.
And I think, building on that in terms of like making it easy, I've looked at this in the past through a lot of different organizations and the work we do with a lot of different customers. So we have a lot of data to understand what this looks like. And when you talk about multiple handoffs, let's say, and multiple touches, typically there's a threshold people are willing to put up with. And once you get past, once you get into 3 unique agents or 3 or more touches to resolve an issue, you see about a 15 to 20% drop off in CSAT like immediately. Where if your CSAT is in the mid 80s on your first 3 touches, it goes to 70 on your if you get to the 4th touch. So and the same holds true with the agent handover. So I think it kind of tracks back to how hard was it to get a solution, and if you're getting this 1 and 2 touch resolutions, your CSAT is going to be much higher than if you're having agents who are pinging back and forth and getting their productivity metrics up, but your overall CSAT's dropping. So I think that's kind of goes hand in hand with that.
Yeah. If I have to go to your help documentation and then I go to your chat and I click on the predetermined decision trees and I can't get to it, so then I go back to my help docs and then I finally send an email, no one responds to me, and then I'm just pissed, right? And that's not a good experience. I hope someone from Comcast is on this call listening, because I have this feel like every time I'm working with them, right? It's just not a great experience. And so what is the customer effort score? That's one of those metrics we talked about earlier. And so making sure that you're taking that into account, making sure it's easy. So like, what are some of the different levers we can pull? Terry and Rajiv, I'm curious, when we look at CSAT, it's not like we can just focus on the metric itself. There are a lot of different levers. It's not so cut and dry. How can we make an impact on CSAT?
Yeah, so I would, and Terry, feel free to chime in here, but I would definitely look at the data more broadly. And I think we've been talking about that, not just focusing on CSAT, but looking at everything more broadly and then coming up with that plan of action. And, you might ask yourself questions like, how can I reduce wait times? Or how can I reduce the amount of time it takes for an agent to find what they're looking for? How can I better enable and improve my agent's knowledge, or really create a more personalized experience? Again, looking really at the full picture and then creating that plan of action.
Yeah, and I'll dovetail that into there's, if you've got your data set up in such a way and you're able to triage and understand the different issues, and looking at the drivers of CSAT for different issues, maybe different issues need to be prioritized in different ways. So, if you have let's say if you set really tight SLAs for issues that you feel like are high priority, you can test that, right? And that's one of the things that I really believe in is A/B testing things and trying to understand what's the sensitivity of CSAT to certain drivers, right? So it's definitely something, if you've got the data set up in such a way where you can say, hey, my technical tickets, a 4-hour reply time gets 80% CSAT, but when I dial down to 1, it's up to 90, versus, maybe general billing questions, it's the inverse is true. So I think it's having that ability to prioritize and understand, you have different customers with different needs, and what are their, how can you best allocate your resources to make sure you're optimizing on the CSAT?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it goes back to looking at the entire customer experience. It's not just your knowledge base. It's not just your FAQ. It's not just your chat or your email. It's looking at the entire customer support journey. What are they doing? How can I improve those processes? How can I simplify it? And taking that holistic approach. So let's dive into the final category, and this is reducing the overall costs for your organization. And sometimes when we talk about costs, we're talking about a lot of different things. We're talking about headcount, we're talking about software, we're talking about other costs such as lost revenue or lost revenue expansion. right? There's a lot of different ways to approach costs. Rajiv, how and Terry, both of you guys, I'm just curious, how do you guys take a look at the cost associated with customer support? Terry, specifically, you mentioned earlier that support is viewed as the cost center. And that's kind of the difficulty. One of the reasons we call this the impossible task, this webinar, is because customer support leaders feel like they're asked to, improve productivity, improve performance, work on customer satisfaction, drive revenue, but reduce all your costs because we want to. It's cost center, right?
I think
you guys don't drive revenue, so reduce all your costs. And so,
I think there's a few misconceptions too, and I think anyone in this industry has felt that. The first is that certainly, if you're still looking at your customer support organization as a cost center, like frankly, you're a dinosaur, and and that's it's just not. We're seeing so much data that suggests that the experience is really everything. So I think that's really I don't mean to say we've changed the guard that quickly, but it really has. And I think that level of investment to drive that is being seen. And I think that's why you've seen such an explosion of the tools in this industry over the last decade, is people have recognized how important this is. It's that lost revenue is associated with a poor CSAT interaction. It's very clear. So I think that's piece number one to that is just understanding that this is if you're not on board with this, you're really falling behind. I think
I'm gonna quote you on that. If you're looking at support as a cost center, you're a dinosaur. So
I'm a big dinosaur fan. Okay, like I like dinosaurs, but just like
I think you're spot on. It's companies are now realizing how important customer experience, how important customer support is to growth. And so, I think you're spot on. Rajiv, what are your thoughts there?
No, I mean, I think you both nailed it.
Awesome. Yeah, the only thing I'd add there is I think we need to get rid of this mindset that costs are people, costs are software processes, right? It's really about how do I create a better experience, because that experience, like one of the biggest costs in my mind is going to be lost revenue through churn and lost revenue through expansion, meaning someone are going to buy more of your product, right? And when you start building your data and your strategy around that, it's going to be built around customer experience and around growth versus just getting OCD around a particular metric like CSAT, right? And so,
sorry, Chet. One interesting thing I think that's also we see, and I think talking about the impossible task of, hey, how do you reduce costs and increase CSAT simultaneously? And I think another misconception is that those two things are diametrically opposed. I don't think they're mutually exclusive at all. I think there's a lot of ways where you can reduce your costs, and because of that, you're increasing your CSAT. I mean, the customers don't want to be, on the phone any longer than you want to be on the phone, right? They don't want to be chatting any more than they have to chat, and every touch that they have makes them less satisfied, and every touch you have is more expensive. So I think it's like there's kind of in the past it's been thought of like, hey, we can either have high performance from a CSAT or other measurable outcome, or we can have lower costs. And I think those two are now, with technology in the last 10 years, and it's one of the reasons I think that statement about dinosaurs is true, is because those two things now are complementary and they don't contradict each other.
Yeah. So let's talk for a second about actual costs, like some of the hard costs we have. What are some of those costs and how do we reduce them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is reduce problems, right? If you have a line of sight into your product group and making sure that the product is built better or designed better, or solutions are better, and people don't have a problem to begin with, I think that's ideal. But a lot of that is not necessarily within our control. We want to get as much influence as possible, and I think historically it's been a fight to have a seat at the table. I think people can probably reflect and agree with that. Customer support has not always had a seat at the table when it comes to those sort of product design decisions or quality decisions where, hey, we're the bullwhip here, and can you guys please make this small improvement so that way we can deflect 30% of these tickets, right? Those sorts of things. If you can have that influence and find ways to do that, it's huge. Yeah,
absolutely love that. I think it's a vital, no customer support, we don't fix products, right? But we are one of the biggest mouthpieces to our customers, and we should be communicating those things to the product team, to the R&D team, whatever that team looks like, making sure that they have that insight so that we can reduce the number of tickets. Rajiv, what are your thoughts on ways to reduce tickets?
Totally, yeah. And Chet, just to add on, I agree. I mean, as we've said earlier in the discussion, agents are the frontliner for customer support. They're engaging with these folks every day and really have that knowledge. I think like in terms of reducing costs, and like, Terry, I agree with what you said. And just to add on to that, I think this is really where something like AI can come in handy. If we think about, improving processes, improving the self-service experience. And so again, this is really where I feel like AI can come in handy, whether it's, deploying a chatbot to help with that self-service experience, to really help improve case deflection for your agents, or even could be, deploying like a triaging tool to help save your company's time by predicting fields on tickets, rallying them to the right agents, or even through an assist tool like we were talking about earlier, providing your agents with an agent assist product that helps them find the answers that they're looking for much faster, rather than having to go out to look through different systems to find what they're looking for, resulting in these longer wait times, really just so that they can help address the customer needs much faster.
Absolutely. As you're talking, like one of the biggest costs for support is taking a ticket and something that could be resolved in a matter of an hour, minutes, and making it a 4 or 5 day process. As those start to build up, it takes more human power to resolve those. And the longer those go on, you also start to see customer churn and other issues start to arise. It reminded me of a story of one of our customers. This is a popular home service provider marketplace where you can go and find a plumber, you can go and find, someone to walk your dog, right? And they, one of the examples that they shared with us is they had a customer that sent them an email, and it said something like, hey, the technician came by and asked me to do something. I wasn't comfortable. I wanted to let you guys know about that. Right? There's no keywords in here, no chatbot, no regular chatbot's going to flag this because it's not like no keywords are going to grab onto that, right? But because they utilize some level of AI in like understanding the sentiment and intent behind that email that was sent in, they were able to quickly escalate that automatically as a high priority to their security and risks team. Normally, what would happen is it would wait a day or two for a customer support agent to manage through all the incoming tickets. They would then see that and say, hey, take it to their manager. Their manager would go through with that one with all the other ones they were given, and then eventually escalate it to the right team, right? By putting together AI, by utilizing AI in creating smart processes, the AI can understand that, the intent and the sentiment behind that without looking for any red flag keywords, because it can understand the relationship between the two different or the different words within that email, right? And so that's one way that you're able to reduce those costs, is because by reducing the length of a ticket. Terry, we were talking earlier offline about overall forecasting and planning improvement. Walk me through some of the different things that you've done there with teams, and how would you recommend someone to approach that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a key factor in driving down your costs, right, is being able to drive down the actual agent costs. And if you, depending on your staffing model, if you're able to have a longer view of, hey, how many heads are we going to need over the next few months, it's a lot easier to plan your onboarding and raise your hand if you've ever been asked to rush a whole bunch of agents in at once because of a demand spike that everyone's all coming but support, right, for whatever reason. And you talked about getting a seat at the table, and I think treating forecasting more strategic and understanding, if you're in a supply chain oriented business, that supply chain forecasting is typically pretty a pretty serious process that has a lot of inputs, and oftentimes the forecasting for support requirements isn't really there. So I think getting ahead of that to the extent where you can better plan your headcount, and not just from a month, but also understanding, hey, where your hourly waves expected, where is it important that we make sure that we have our agent staff, and we'll just keep your costs lower. You don't have to have as much redundancy. I think that's a big thing. And also, hey, that's a great way not to burn your employees by having to call them up on a weekend and say, hey, we need to come in on overtime because we didn't properly forecast for this past week. I still believe the biggest thing you can do to keep your costs down personally is just reduce your agent turnover. The cost of training, onboarding, offboarding, the loss of knowledge capture, and just the institutional knowledge you lose by losing good agents is incredible. And you add in the fact that you've got to interview these people, your team has to interview these people, you have to resource them. It's an incredibly expensive process to go through. And then in such a highly dynamic labor pool that you to pull from, it's really challenging. So one of the things that can help with that is using a VPO or third-party resources where they can help insulate you from some of that turnover and some of the training and offboarding and onboarding challenges that are associated with that.
Well, this is not necessarily directly related, but somewhat related. While you're talking about forecasting, do you want to show this document that teams can use to kind of predict the ROI and any sort of changes that they might make in their organization? Do you have the ability to share on your end, or should I share it?
Yeah, maybe you want to share, because I think I have my screens are a little wide, maybe.
Yeah, let me go ahead and do that, and then you can just walk me through the steps you want me to take on the screen. Okay, yeah, here we go.
This is a template that I've used in the past, and actually I tried to find my original from a few years back, but I kind of reconstructed this over the last few days. And I'm sorry if you guys hear any screaming in the background. I think a 3-year-old Mr. Nap Time, so sorry if it's coming up. But this is a tool that's built really for subscription services support right now. I'm happy if anyone needs some help building one for a product oriented service. Feel free to DM me. I'm happy to help out. But really, the objective here is to understand the impact of CSAT and churn on the overall business case for treating support as more than a cost center, right? So this template is built out in such a way where you can play around with some of these inputs, and if you have enough visibility to understand, hey, what does the customer churn look like for a satisfied customer versus a dissatisfied customer, right? Well, we can start to compartmentalize and deconstruct what the investment looks like to increase CSAT. So if we have a tool or some sort of project that we feel like we can increase our CSAT in this example by 2%, what's that worth to us, right? Over the long term, what's the payback period on something like that? So you can play around with some of these numbers. Again, it's a tool that's supposed to be helpful if you're in this industry. And again, if it's not, feel free to DM me. I'm happy to help out. But it's something that I've used in the past, and it's been really successful in garnering resources and getting the green light on a lot of these investments.
Yeah, it's really easy to go to your C-suite and say, "Hey guys, I'm going to get a 3,000% rate of return on this. Can I get the okay?" Right? If you have the data to show it, right?
Yeah,
I'm sure these numbers are just something you put together, but yeah, that's the idea here. Is when you put together a solid strategy, you want to take that to your team and get the buy-in. And if you can show data like this and put it in dollar amounts, it makes your job a lot easier as a customer support leader.
Yeah, certainly. And I think that's one of the things I touched on earlier is being able to understand from a cohort perspective, hey, what is the customer behavior I see from my satisfied customers versus my dissatisfied customers, right? And oftentimes I've seen 5 to 10x difference in churn rates between the satisfied and dissatisfied cohorts. And I think the same would be true in a lot of the one-time purchase industries, where their overall revenue or their return rates and that sort of thing also correlate with that. So it's something that I've had a lot of success with. And again, if there's any more questions on that, feel free to DM me.
Awesome. Thank you. Last question, and then we're going to turn this over to some Q&A if anyone has any questions. When you're looking at reducing costs, what are some resources that you guys would go and you'd recommend someone to go and implement?
Yeah, I can jump in there, and then Terry, feel free to chime in. I think we've talked about a few different tools that can really drive impact. But, when we think about really transforming the customer experience, I wouldn't say it's just about just deploying a chatbot and kind of like, that's it, chatbot can handle everything. No, that's just one piece of it. It's really thinking about the full customer support lifecycle and really understanding how you as a company are supporting your agents, supporting your customers, and really solving every step of that journey.
Awesome. And Terry?
Yeah, I think the cost of, again, it's a challenging thing because you want to make sure you're always balancing that with the agent experience, right? And those things don't have to be opposed. And I think the investment in automation, as Rajiv mentioned, is critical. Another thing you look to is just, hey, other portions of this business where we can outsource this and save my internal team from some of the pain that maybe we aren't able to automate ourselves out of, right? I had that experience in a prior role where my internal team was really struggling, and we were able to outsource the ugly parts of the process. And while we still had our outsourced agents, we still felt like we're part of the team. It was a less painful process to have to manage them and manage those agent experience on that side, because we had a really solid BPO partner who did it well. And if you've got the scale to distribute your demand across multiple partners and create a kind of a competitive network, that's really a great way to do that, because then you can essentially start getting things down to the best performer and the best cost adjusted performer. So I think that's definitely something that I would encourage folks looking to look into. It's something that I was hesitant to do at first when I first kicked off in this space, and now honestly I wouldn't have it any other way, where I like to have a solid core of internal agents who are subject matter experts and are great team leads and have great morale and carry that company flag. But everything that I feel like we deflect or we outsource.
Awesome. Love that. Okay, what I'd like to do now is allow people to ask some questions. I think there's a little bit of a delay from when we receive the question via LinkedIn. So if you have any questions you'd like Terry or Rajiv to answer, feel free to post them in the chat, and we'll give you a minute or two to get those in. In the meantime, Rajiv and Terry, take a minute. If someone has any interest in learning about Forethought ArenaCX, how do you want them to contact you?
Yeah, so for Forethought, I would definitely say check us out on our website. If you go to forethought.ai, you can learn more about our different products, our platform. And then if you did want to see a demo, there's a form you can use to contact us, and our sales team can reach out to schedule a conversation.
Yeah, I think similarly for us, feel free to check out our website and go through that flow, ArenaCX.com. But again, if you have any questions about some of my experiences or anything like that as well, or any other help you need, feel free to DM me. I try to be responsive. So
perfect. So one of the things that we wanted to make sure that each person that attended today had access to was a summary of all the elements that we talked about, kind of like a go-to checklist. So if you go to forethought.ai/impossible, you'll be able to download two things. One of them is just a PDF checklist of the three main categories in some of the things that we discussed today. Just more of like a self-check for you to look at as you're planning out your organization and the different changes you might make over the coming 6, 12, 18 months. The other thing is an Excel spreadsheet that we went through with Terry today, showing you how to calculate and forecast the potential ROI of any change and improvement you want to make in your organization or process. So definitely go to that URL, download that file, and use it to improve your customer support organization. That is all that we have today. Terry and Rajiv, I appreciate the time. I know you guys are busy, and appreciate everyone that took the moment, an hour out of the day, to tune in and engage. We had some great comments. We weren't able to share them all across the screen, but we had a lot of great comments. So thank you, and look forward to seeing you guys all on the next webinar.
Thanks, Chet. Bye, everyone.
See you, everyone.